Hello again, everybody. Sebastian here with another Watch Your Rooms video. I just wanted to quickly cover some of the issues that I'm encountering as I'm learning more about life after the ban has been lifted here when it comes to being able to access Watch Your Realms on our mobile devices and PCs. So for those of you that may not be aware of, there was a little bit of a ban that was enacted recently when it came to the United States in terms of BitDance property. And essentially what he said here in HR 7521, which was enacted last year, was passed by Congress, signed into law by President Biden. Essentially what happened was that they pretty much formalized an executive order that President Trump has signed all the way back in 2020. I think it was August 2020. President Trump signed an executive order saying United States companies cannot have any business dealings with companies like Tencent and BitDance, especially when they're given user data to entities like the Chinese government. And so at the time, WeChat and TikTok got cut. Tencent then decided we're going to start just cutting off our services from the United States. And a lot of that happened down the line. And one of the very good examples that happened was Dragon Air Silent Gods, because what happened is that there was the developer, which was kind of the game was being distributed in Nurburgring, and essentially what happened was the BitDance then sold off that branch of the gaming. They kept moonton, but they sold off that brand. And then once Tencent got their hands on it, they pretty much said, no, we're cutting off US players. We don't want to deal with them, especially when they're having executive orders and then they're proposing laws like this. And then we lost access to the game. Now, here in 7521, essentially what he's saying is any company that deals with BitDance and anything that BitDance distributes, they're going to get fairly prosecuted. So as we notice, one thing that happened is that BitDance said, we're going to cut off access to United States users even before the ban goes in effect, because they wanted to make a power play. But then Google and Apple pretty much said, well, we're gonna have to safeguard ourselves, and we're going to pull all these apps from our store. We're not even going to make them accessible anymore until you all clear this up, right? Because we don't want to get caught in the middle of this. President Trump came in, and essentially what he said is, I'm going to send an executive order pretty much saying to my executive branch and the Justice Department, saying, don't prosecute anybody. Let's give them a 75-day window for us to work with BitDance to see if there's a way for them to divest 50% of the company, so either a U.S. corporation or a U.S. entity can acquire it, right? Then we'll have access to the algorithm, and we'll get a general sense of how you're using that algorithm and what the Chinese government is getting out of it. However, with all the discussions that are going with the TikTok, it hasn't been really cleared up whether this also applies to anything else that BitDance does, right? So our assumption way the bill is written, because it says anything BitDance has to be sold. So we have to assume that in any part of these deals, moonton has to be included in it as well, whether they're selling Nubers, 50% of Nubers, or just outright selling 50% of moonton, or selling moonton itself to another corporation, right? Whether it has to be United States, I have no idea. But I imagine that if they just clear themselves of BitDance, then this law does not apply to them. So that's probably one way that we're going to make sure that we can keep access to Watch Your Realms, is that we have to see the moonton's association with BitDance is completely cut off, or somehow 50% of the company is acquired by somebody else that is satisfactory to the United States government. All right. So in this whole thing, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. So number one, I think that during this period here, especially when it came to one of the updates that rolled out in the game here, and let me see if I can go back to the game here. So remember this update that is really weird? It was like cut off for 2 hours, but there's nothing listed as to what exactly was going on in the update. So I imagine that this was their way of them preparing themselves to be able to update the game without updating the app again, because this is going back again to the the initial conflict that there was in Europe, I imagine, with Apple and Moonton. And this is why they could not update the app in Apple. So we saw all this backdooring updates and how the updates were slowed down, right? The banners were not coming in when we were expecting them, and things were changing on the fly. And it was because of that, because they could not update the apps. So the scheduling got thrown off. And I imagine that this is part of it, because maybe they were given a little bit of a hint saying we got to prepare in case we do lose access to the apps in the Apple Store and the Google Play Store. So, I mean, this is just me postulating, but I'm just saying that there are some hints here that they were preparing just for this case, in case there was an inability to update the game, especially when it came to the United States Play Stores. Because if, let's say, here coming up in February, they update the game and they update the app on all the other regions where the game is still available, the app that the United States users have is going to become inoperable, right? You have to update the app to be able to use it in the current status of the game. So I imagine that any updates that are coming in, they're going to have to do it without updating the app so they don't cut off the United States users. Now, that is for Android and Apple devices. For the PC client, I imagine that that's still going to be easily updatable, and they're going to be able to offer the game in that manner. But we know that this is a mobile game, so a lot of the players that play this game do not specifically play on a PC. They use a mobile device to access the game. So it's going to be really hard for them to carry an update within the next 75 days without really cutting off all the United States players and not having them, giving them a new app. So it's harder to backload apps on Apple. With Android, it's a lot easier because you can just use APKs, especially if you can get your hands on a very trusty APK of the game. But I imagine that APKs might be the life of the future here for this game, especially if they don't reach a deal in the future. So the reason that I titled United States, this video, United Players Beware, is because you are all celebrating the fact that we have access back to the game, but I'm looking a little bit more forward. I'm looking ahead to see what would happen if in 75 days a deal is not reached. Well, number one, we know for sure that if a deal is not reached between BytedAnce, the United States government, the Chinese government, we're just going to lose access to the game again. Whether it's going to be accessible through VPN, we'll find out, right, when that time comes. But if there is a deal that is reached, and because everybody's going to be focusing on TikTok, given that 140 million United States people use it, then we have to make sure that either Nubers or Moonton is somehow included in there, so they're not part of, or they don't get sniped because of the law, the way that the law is written. So we have to watch out for that as well. But a sale like that, I would imagine, would take more than 75 days, especially if Moonton wants to completely disassociate themselves from BytedAnce, or somebody is willing to buy 50% of Moonton. Okay, so we have to watch out for that. The other thing is, the easy fix, I imagine, for a lot of you would be just to repeal the law. But I don't see that coming. I don't see that coming. This whole situation got started by an executive order by President Trump. It would strike me ironic if he's the one that completely does a 180 and says, okay, Congress, go ahead and repeal the law, send it to me and I'll sign it. That would be a best hope, but I don't think it's going to happen. So that's another situation to keep an eye on. The other thing is, again, with the updates, let's keep an eye on that, because if we cannot update the game, the game, we're going to lose access to it, especially since the apps are not in the store. So because of all this turmoil, of everything else that is going on, and the uncertainty with our ability to access the game, please be very conscious, especially if you're a United States player, on your spending habits in the game. Okay, I would assume that if you spend anything in the game right now, that you know for sure that there's a possibility that you're gonna lose it. Okay, So you have to, I guess, in that manner, you have to be conscious about the practices that you are going to carry out. And if you're just thinking that you're just going to go ahead and just do a mass refund at the end, good luck. Hopefully, your credit card company can help you in that regard. Now, for my case, for my situation here, when I tried doing, because I was just trying it out. I tried to make a $2 purchase in the Google Play Store, and when I tried doing that, it actually blocked me. It said that I could not access it. It was not going on there. So that's I don't know if you can get around that with Apple or Google. Good luck. Maybe Google will then, give you the money back if you do decide to do a mass refund. But at least in my case, I saw it did not allow me to do it. So I think that they're safeguarding themselves again because the law says you cannot make any deals with it. So they're just saying, no, I don't want to deal with this. All right. In purchases of W Gold, again, that's going to have to be you're going to have to make that decision because it is possible you might lose it. Right. The company, the third party platforms could easily say they knew that this game had a little bit of a window. They did it at their own risk. We're not going to offer the refund. So again, you're doing it on your own risk when it comes to purchases in that regard. For my end here, when it comes to spending, I'm not going to do any. I actually decided to cut off any Smile One type of advertisements from the channel for now until we have a clearer picture for Moonton specifically, and they're a little bit more transparent and forthcoming as to what will actually happen in case a deal is not reached. That's what I'm waiting for on them, instead of just saying due to unforeseen circumstances, because I truly believe that the circumstances were not unforeseen unless the developers are really, really, really not paying attention to the geopolitical landscape, and they just were waiting for the suits and ties to tell them exactly what was coming down the pipeline, and then they had to prepare themselves for it. So at this point, they have to be aware that something funky is going on. They were told that they had to block access to United States players. So the best way that I think that Moonton can, the best thing that Moonton can do from here on is to just be transparent and say, listen, if instead of saying, hey, Beelzebub is coming, try to spend as much as you can to get that A3, instead of doing that, they should really be a little bit more forthcoming and saying, here are some of the possibilities that may affect game accessibility to United States players in the future. And the sooner that they do it, the better. Because then down the line, if the deal is reached, you're probably going to gain trust from the United States players if that is the case, because you were forthcoming. You were giving people a heads up. And so instead of all of a sudden the 75-day window lapses and all of a sudden, oops, we have to cut off access to the game again. If that happens again, that's it for you. I don't, regardless of what happens in the future. I mean, right now, I think you hurt yourself, because I got messages from several players saying, we're out. I got some money refunded. I'm out. This is it. And if for me, for the size of my channel and the size of views that I get in each of the video, even if I see the 10 players left, that's a lot. That is a lot in terms of the proportion of the population. So if somebody like Fastidious would probably got multiple messages, more than 10, saying, no, we're out. This is it. I don't care anymore. I'm not dealing with this company anymore. But if you're a little bit more forthcoming, and this is to Moonton, if you're a little bit more forthcoming from here on, in what the dealings are going to be, especially you being the developer and distributor of the game, you might actually gain a little bit more points with the remaining players. But if you're just going to let things ride and then let things go and then nothing happens within the 75 days that we know something has to happen, and you cut off access to the game, that'll do it. That's it. United States players will not trust you. You will lose that player base. And if you guys know what happened to Dragonair Southern Gods, as soon as they got cut off the United States player base, that game went down. They went downhill, and it hasn't recovered. Okay, except for being in the Chinese server. That's essentially what happened to that game. It's all just on the Chinese server now, but it's not as popular as it used to be a while ago, and it's not getting as much revenue as it did once a while ago. All right, so we'll leave it there. The other thing I wanted to cover too is that you all are also maybe trying to get hints from another game called Marble Snap, and I would caution you to make sure that any comparisons that you make to Marble Snap to Watcher of Realms, that you are dealing with two different entities here. So one of the things that I found out, at least when it came to Marble Snap, is that their game is being distributed by Nubers. Okay, that is why they got caught in the middle of this whole thing, is because the distributor of Marble Snap is Nubers, but the developer is actually called Second Diner. Second Diner is based in the United States. So what they're trying to do right now is that they're trying to find another distributor to put their games and distribute their games in the Apple and Google store, and make sure that they don't fall to the guidelines of law, right? That they are not affected by the law. So Marble Snap is going to try to get away from this. I think that the games that we have to keep in mind are, at least from our interest, are Mobile Legends Bang Bang and Watcher of Realms, because they are part of Moonton. So what I'm going to be keeping an eye on, and what I have my Google's alert set for, is either some type of Nubers sale or Moonton sale. That is possibly one of the ways that this will get incorporated into any type of dealing, especially when it comes to BitDance. But if the deal is only reached with TikTok, that is going to be specific to TikTok. I imagine that if we don't see any of the deals incorporating any of the other apps that BitDance offers, alongside with anything that is distributed by their gaming company, in this case Nubers, then we're going to lose access to the game. So we have to see this be a blanketed sale, right? Anything that BitDance offers has to fall within the guidelines of HR 7521. Otherwise, it's just going to get banned again. So that is from my angle on coming on this video. I just wanted to let US players know we're not completely in the clear yet, and there's a lot of factors here that come into play before we'll feel confident again on whether on the life of the game, our accessibility to the game, and whether we really do want to consider giving any type of financial assistance to this game in the meantime. All right. Thank you all very much for tuning in and watching. I will see you all in the next Watcher of Realms video. Please do hit like and subscribe on your way out.